Hey, that's good. Right, all this house order. Welcome to the final round of first ever Malaysian National School Spelling Championship. What will you invite Constance and A?
In most cases, these less economically developed countries have a less of an ability to provide for sufficient international sporting events. At the same time, catering for their citizens. It's one thing of hosting an event, but it's another thing of hosting a good event and at the same time being a good state and being a good government in catering for their country. We don't want a rich and lavish World Cup. We want a basic World Cup that can, that has sufficient necessities and sufficient facilities, but we don't agree with it when it comes at the expense of harming your citizens and harming the sports and the quality of that sporting event as a whole. Because then what's the purpose of you hosting that particular sporting event? I'll be talking about two substantives in my speech. Number one, why developing countries don't have an ability to host this World Cup and why they take too much of a risk. Secondly, and very briefly, why we maintain the quality of international sporting events. Let's move on very fast to my first substantive. Why developing countries don't have an ability and why they take too much of a risk. The first reason that I will explain is that why these countries opt to host the World Cup. Like, what are the assumptions that they make before they want to host the World Cup? The first assumption that they make is that they can make a lot of money out of it and they will get some form of profit out of it. So they think it's a good investment. They assume that more foreign direct investment will come in and so on and so forth. All these things are harmful. Why? Number one, we argue that countries don't profit from hosting the World Cup for a few reasons. A, FIFA has an agreement with countries that host the World Cup that they will take away 75% of the profit at the end of the day of the particular World Cup. So when it comes to ticketing or when it comes to the merchandise that they sell, FIFA will get 75% of this particular profit. So the leftover of the 25% is to cover for the demands that FIFA has. So FIFA also has an agreement that you must build a number of stadiums and you must have a number of hotels for the players and for the people to stay, for the people that come for the World Cup to watch or whatsoever to stay. So what Brazil did was that they had 4 billion in debt to cover the cost, the extra cost, because that 25% wasn't enough for them to get to cover all the demands that FIFA had. What more make a profit out of it in the first place? So they were left with 4 billion of a debt. So foreign direct investment is the second assumption that countries will make. So they assume that a lot of foreign direct investment, a lot of MNCs will come into their countries and set up things and whatsoever. Like what happened is that, like especially in Brazil, what happened was that, no thank you sir, they left after a while. So because they didn't see a benefit in staying there, because the economy was so bad and the people weren't even buying their product. So what, like the hotels and whatever thing that they build, like the people don't have the capacity to produce and to buy this kind of products that they are willing to sell, because the economy is just so bad. So there is no benefit in them staying there. But even if the best case scenario that they make some money out of it, where does this money go to? This money goes to the private companies that come and take over in these particular countries. When this foreign direct investment comes in, they make the money and they leave. They leave you in poverty. They don't care about what you're left with. Even if you say you're going to make money out of taxing them, it's not as much money to cover and to make you a more progressive nation as he told, compared to the money that they will make out of you. Before I move on to my second reason, sure.
Local companies who come and promote their food, meaning they sell their food during the day. So these are the companies that will give them revenue. Tell them take our best system. If that happens, you stop it.
Okay, so like your example is like Ayam Penyet is going to go over more than McDonald's when they come to Brazil. Like obviously, people are even scared to go to. People who are even scared to go to Brazil. What more buy the products that were made in Brazil? Like obviously, the people, the foreign direct investment that comes into the country will have an upper hand than your very local products that you want to sell to them. But it's only for the period of the World Cup. After the World Cup, you don't make any more money and you don't make any more profit because the people on the ground don't have the capacity and the capability to buy your product. The second reason that I'll be explaining is that why does it come at the expense or the cost of this particular of the hosting the World Cup. The first reason is that they take too much of a risk. It's either they have to generate income or they have to take money from other sectors, like what Brazil did. They took the money from the railway system and they shut down the railway system for like 2 or 3 weeks, so that they needed the money to pump it into the production or the generation of the World Cup, especially when it comes to like building the stadium or whatsoever. Secondly, even when it's about the quality of the World Cup, like that's why a lot of people didn't go. Like even though they made some money out of ticketing, but they could have made more money out of ticketing if another country had hosted it. Because the people weren't convinced that I should go there in respect of my safety, in respect of my comfortability. Why would I go to a country that is less economically developed, that can't provide for my needs? Like it's one thing about watching the World Cup, but it's another thing also about feeling safe and it's about being comfortable while you watch the World Cup. Why would I just rather watching the TV if the country is so going to be so bad and not going to provide for me? Have a seat. Thirdly, the basic rights and security. Like children were forced to work in Brazil and China when they wanted to host the Olympics. Like 2,000 children, 20,000 children were working in the Brazil World Cup when they had to build the stadiums and all. And this 20,000 is only the 20,000 that they found out was working. That means there were other children that were illegally working that they never wanted to prove to the FIFA or never wanted to prove to any other news corporation. The workers had to work overtime and they were underpaid for working overtime. They have to tell us why these countries that develop make a very good investment. Like we will disprove why it's a very good investment. Like all the things that they say will bring a benefit to them will only exist as so far as the World Cup happens. Like as so far as that 26 days goes through, they will make their money. But after that, the 12 stadiums that you build will become redundant. The 12 hotels that you build for your people or for the players will become redundant because the purchasing power is not within the people of Brazil to afford those kind of hotels and not to, like, what are they going to do? Play in the stadium? Like, we already have the sufficient amount of stadiums. Those are things that are out of the boundaries, right? They don't have to buy so many, they don't have to make so many stadiums for the players. If they have one, it's good enough. But we're talking about overspending and overdoing everything. The third reason that I have is corruption and bad financial management. These less economically developed countries have bad financial management. It's very little transparency and corruption rates are very high. So we don't know where the money is going. Even if they make money, it's going in the pockets of these politicians. What did Brazil do? They lied about their financial status to FIFA. They said, oh no, we're all good, everything is good, we'll have money to host the World Cup. And then later, they took away money from their social welfare. They took away money from their railway system, all this public transportation system before the World Cup. Because during the World Cup, obviously they had to have it because FIFA was spread over. But before that, the people didn't have it. And all these things are money that they swindled into to host the World Cup. Very fast. How will this maintain the quality of international sporting events? It's already 6:30. In the macro thing, we think that the World Cup and the Olympics is about every country. It's not only about your country. It's about cheaper equipment that these countries will develop. It's about worse stock facilities that these countries will propagate. All these things would devalue the value of a particular quality and the quality of an international sporting event. People don't feel comfortable and people feel safe. Or don't feel safe. All these things are important when it comes to hosting a World Cup. We're very proud to propose.
We thank participants. Next is live competition. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, judging. I'm sorry. Mr. Speaker, being allowed to host a major sporting event only allows you to profit into the experience. We think that the experience you obtain from hosting this sort of major sporting event is actually worth the trade-off. So let's recognize the issues coming from Lyman's speech. He said that his first idea was that how these less economically developed countries don't have the ability to host. It's a risky trade-off. Like he said that they assume it's an investment, but yes, it's true. This is the investment. This is the investment that's going to change their lives. It's going to change the country to becoming less economically developed, to becoming a much more stable and financially developed country. So we're willing to make the trade-off. We're willing to make the trade-off that even if it's an assumption, it is that sort of investment that we're going to make to pull in these international communities into our less economically developed countries. This is a chance to recognize this for investment. Firstly, you get more recognition because you're known as a country who is less economically developed, and you're deciding to host a major sporting event. Of course, people won't believe that it's true, but yes, that's an investment that we're willing to make. And then he talked about how FIFA will take 75% of their sporting event. But all FIFA does is that they only charge for the cost of the players hosting the tournament. They only recognize that after Brazil, after human rights abuses in Brazil, they only recognize that Brazil is going through some deep shit, and that's why they pull up the 75% and listen it to 50%. His special errors are only like 3 years late. They only recognize this being an issue over the past year. Sit down and he also said this was an important bit. He also said that they are taking money from other sectors. Yes, this is exactly true. Because if you hadn't hosted that sporting event, you would have known that the government is taking money from other sectors. We think that when these less economically developed countries are hosting major sporting events, that's the only way the international community will recognize that they are taking money from other sectors. And he said something about human rights abuses. In China, he decided to engage on the age-old China abusing labor rights in the Olympics. Come on, this was in 2008, 7 years ago. 3 years ago in 2013. China only came out clean. They said that they agreed that they were abusing human rights, and they won't do it again. Because it's factual error. His facts only probably a decade late. So that's why we're probably not quick to accept that. So now, I'm going to talk about 2 things. Firstly, how publicity. I'm going to talk about publicity. How sports events can have the more unique form of publicity. Sit down. Secondly, I'm going to talk about what this allows investments in the country economically. So let's move to my first argument. Publicity. No. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So you are telling me that
World Cup that happens 4 years once, that the whole world cares about, is your experiment for your country that is have high rate of corruption and a low rate of transparency with their people.
No, that international communities recognize the faults in the transparency. Once Brazil hosted the World Cup, if Brazil had not hosted the World Cup, people would have known that the government is taking lots of money out of the transportation funds, out of transportation budgets, thinking that the major sporting events is the only way to filter out these bad countries. So first I consider publicity. Firstly, why publicity you get from sports is one of the best kind. Sports events are usually popular and only happen once in a while. Therefore, the ratings and views you get on TV when you broadcast are plummeting. The YouTube views you get from broadcasting your live events, the sponsorship deals from brands like Nike or Adidas spike up. So the reason is that publicity the reason publicity is created is that it garners the interest in the audience, it garners the interest in the people to engage by watching it, by even flying to that country. So these forms of publicity usually put the state under the spotlight. So meaning you get more international attention, you get more international communities focusing on that major sporting event because it only happens once every time. So by garnering international attention, this also equates in domestic participation. So things such as motivation for the people to set up their stores, set up their businesses domestically, can also get recognized by the international market. So secondly, why will this publicity allow the state to progress both internationally and socially? So first reason, when there's international attention put on these countries, they're expected to adhere onto international standards. So they're responsible to pushing up the game. So things like treatment or things like establishment, things like reputation are all at stake. So once they don't fulfill these responsibilities, then once they don't fulfill these responsibilities, they will definitely be filtered out as a country who can't host. So this is why experience is the more important one in this way. So not only will this give incentive to a country to progress when it's backwards, but also acts as a check and balance for countries on whether or not they can adhere to international standards. So second reason, in the case of an abuse in a regulation and establishment, for example, you force people to work, the attention from the international community only highlights the structural flaws. So by forcing these major sporting events, you highlight the flaws you highlight the flaws of the transparency of the government, you highlight the flaws of the government putting out the funds from the transportation budget. So it's one of the economic briefing on why this allows investments in the country's economy. So when we have these major sporting events, it involves the dealerships. Nike wants to be a part of it, so they will definitely pay to be a part of it. So this is the assumption that I'm making. So it is definitely justified to invest in these sort of things because you do get revenue. It isn't an assumption on their side. So also it gives opportunity to domestic companies to be able to show themselves to investors from the international community. So the third reason, when a country hosts a major sporting event and it goes off well, we set up precedents for it being not only for a country being accountable for a really huge sporting event, but also for being an emerging presence on an international scale. This is what draws in investors. So regardless of the financial capability of that state, I think the benefits that are accrued are insurmountable. So you get more revenue. This isn't an assumption. This is the real deal. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for the opposition. General reminder to all, please observe a few seconds of silence between intervals of POIs. Right. The do is divide PDF. Okay. Side opposition can't tell us that revenue is generated from developing countries hosting World Cups. At the same time, parallelly, for example, FIFA cutting their income from 75% to 50% because there is little to no income that can be generated in a less economically developed country. We have already conceded to a certain extent that a large number of countries don't have the capacity, and this is why they are willing to use this World Sporting event as a process of elimination to figure out which country has the ability to host the World Cup All these problems came out from the leader of opposition speech. He created arguments and contradicted them. I want to put two arguments myself. Firstly, why this pushes countries to aspire more for development, particularly to reach a current standard to allow them to host the World Cup? Secondly, why can't less economically developed countries hosting world sporting events is not representative of the people and not representative of democracy? Before that, last number of rebuttals. First thing he told us was that you will make them better, and this was in no response to the large amount of reasoning that came up from the Prime Minister. We had proved to you extensively how problems will arise, how people has the ability and the right to take away the income that a country can make. We have proven to you how countries make bad financial decisions, they lose out foreign direct investments, and their local markets die out. We have proven to you that the fact that countries have no utility for the development that they make, because hotels, products, and even stadiums have no utility once players with insurmountable reputation leave. This means when people leave your country, they take the revenue with it. Ignoring all of this, the leader of opposition chose to make new remarks as to how they make money. Let me take them down. The first thing he told us that people will know the problems. People will know the problem. Yes, because this is how you make money. When people know there's corruption in your country, that definitely means you're going to make money out of the World Cup. When people already know the problem, they have failed to prove the link how change will then come into place. Because I don't believe that when US is enraged with Brazil for lying on their bid, they will make any attempt to try to fix the corruption within Brazil. I don't believe the people within Brazil will stop rioting anymore when the government of Brazil has taken away their rights, has taken away their liberties, all at the expense of a risk that has cost them everything. We know the problem will be arise, but it can be arise in any other circumstance. We can find it out any other time. We can't risk the World Cup just to find out that problem. But even if they haven't proven to us how this problem will be solved when everybody is pointing at these countries. Second, he told us how experience is elimination. Because he said it seems if your country cannot host the World Cup, then don't. We will just eliminate you in the future. One, this is a concession that side opposition agrees that a large amount of countries don't have the ability to host the World Cup. That's not proving to us why a blanket policy is in order. But secondly, we don't think the elimination process happens here because the damage is already done. They are not allowed. They haven't proved to us how this damage can come at the expense of an elimination process. The elimination process happens under our side, Mr. Speaker, when we validate you on your ability to take care of the World Cup, when we validate you on your financial capacity to take care of the World Cup. So this is essentially what's happening. We are simulating your ability to take care of the World Cup. If you don't, you fail. They let damages happen to people within society. If you fail, it's okay. We won't pick you for the next World Cup. That is their only reason. The last response that I'll make is for this argument of dealerships. Because they chose to ignore the levels that came from England and they chose to bring on their new arguments. So he made two levels. The first one killed the second level. The first level was that he said that Nike comes and Nike will sponsor. One, people in Brazil don't have the ability to buy boots or don't have the financial capacity to buy these products. So once the World Cup is over, Brazil will leave and they will not open anymore, they're not outsourced anymore into Brazil. So even if people buy, the foreigners will come into Brazil, buy their products, money goes into Nike, Nike leaves. Then his second level was that local markets will come. Won't Brazil trump local markets because people want the best product that existed in Brazil? And considering local markets never thrive because there is no demand, they will not thrive anymore the moment people leave. So competition kills your local markets. Please make arguments that don't contradict each other. First argument, why sporting events are not representative of the people. Countries are not transparent and accountable to the people when they make the choice of adopting a sporting event. A poll taken in Brazil and China shows that a majority of individuals did not want to host a sporting event, but even if they did, they were told that their country had the ability to host a sporting event. People in Brazil announced that they were lied to when Brazil made the bid and told the whole world that they had the ability to host the World Cup. They had the financial capacity to host the World Cup. They could balance it out and everything. And China, when they told the whole world that they had the ability to cover it, but they were found out to be holding humans and children as workers. They were holding to use children as illegal workers just to finish their stadiums in time. What does this mean? That means countries have been lying to their individuals and corruption doesn't prove democracy within these countries. Second, less economically developed countries deserve economic development, not the development that is meant for world sporting events. Democracy is about what people want. And considering people in these countries want development, this side of the house is not according to development. Why? Because developing for a world sporting event does not mean development. It does not mean economic development. These things are short-term, they last only for a certain amount of time. Your income is only a burst for a small amount of time, following which it depletes. Within countries like this, we need things like safe and secure investments. They need to build things like schools that have long-lasting utilitarianism and not stadiums. This is what democracy is about. We need to give the people what they want within democracy. What are the outcomes when you don't give democracy? Riots causing people to stop working. This is another reason why money won't come in. When no one operates the system that a country works in, when people don't work in museums, attraction centers, restaurants, shops, because they're all rioting out on the street, they don't make income, they diminish local markets don't thrive because there's no one there. But secondly, hackers and groups that are trying to diminish the quality of this world sporting event, like the Black Bloc anarchists, which caused a blackout in the World Cup. They even tried to wipe out the data that existed in the World Cup, but they couldn't, right? The point is that they had inspiration and they want to destroy the World Cup. These things cause two harms. One, they diminish reputation in a country, but two, people lose the trust in the government, and this is when a country loses and falls apart. Briefly, the second argument, why this pushes countries to aspire for development. If countries really want to host the World Cup, like they were talking about, they will aspire and we will motivate them to economically develop. These things aren't hard. They just need to create economic development. They need to take the right steps into becoming an economically developed country. And these things indirectly help individuals in the society. They need people on the ground, people who are more financially stable, people on the ground, people with more capacity to buy products. But second, it also creates a new layer of transparency because there's a new platform and there's a new validation for joining the World Cup. You need to be economically transparent. This is good for countries as well as FIFA. So both sides become more transparent. So it's very clear, countries can host the World Cup if they want to. But when they host it in the future, there are more people who buy their products. There are more people who are working with the government. There's a longer lasting system plan.
Yeah.
Alright, thanks, Mr. Prime Minister. Next one we have the video definition.
The ability for sports to emerge as having a collective importance can only be achieved through giving countries the opportunity to host and prove their ability on an international scale. The only blanket policy in this debate is the one presented by Sri government, where they typecast all developing countries to being unable to host a sporting event, but also harming the people while doing so. We deny the characterization, and here's why. In my speech there, I'll ask 4 questions, and my rebuttals be incorporated into these questions. The first question, do developing countries have an ability to host these events? The first level of this is there a profit? We think if even in your worst case scenario, FIFA intervenes and takes up 75%, the revenue is insurmountable. 75% over 100 billion, maybe $1 trillion is still a lot. So therefore they profit from that as well. But even if we think this sets apart to more revenue, a good tournament sets a precedent. When a precedent is set, this does bring in more investors in the future as countries are dealing with sporting events. But the third thing is that profit. If FIFA really did take out 75% and the remaining percent was used to build stadiums, then why would developed countries even have an incentive to also create or establish these forms of events? We deny the allegation that there is no profit or revenue being obtained from these things. But the second thing is that profit on whether or not investors really do contribute back. The only contention they had was that investors choose to leave. No, thank you. Investors, such as McDonald's, set companies in there. When they come in and sell their establishments, they can't just demolish it the minute they want to leave. By setting up establishments, these countries, these investors themselves, put a precedent in that country, especially at a peak time, such as the World Cup, where investments will be coming in. But even still, especially hotels and stadiums. Hotels and stadiums do serve more of a purpose than just to accommodate for the World Cup. Hotels for tourism, after host the World Cup, stadiums also are more sporting events in the future, while these stadiums could be reused, you're going to be given the privilege to host it again. But the second thing under the response from the investors is that you also give opportunities to domestic companies, something which they choose to ignore. We're not talking about IM Pen yet. We're talking about actual Brazilian companies, maybe when it comes to those who could financially be for companies who could take care of the seating, for companies to provide the food and the catering. These are all companies that need the ability to be utilized. What we do is we utilize them in a sport which really has the attention of the media, has the attention of the investors, and when even Nike and Adidas are going to be wanting to get advertised over them. No, thank you. But the second level on this question, on why would this allow for structural reforms? No, thank you. The first thing to structural reforms, because their contention was corruption. We do agree that there are going to be some economic sacrifices in terms of dealing with this World Cup. But that's what we need to do in order to establish a proper World Cup. What is coming to they're making a trade-off for quality. However, what you do is FIFA is the corrupt party in this debate. But what you do is you let them play into the hands of the wealthy countries that you're going to make the World Cup only be open to it. Germany, the US, these are countries that FIFA are corrupted by. That's what you're doing here. You're going to monopolize it by personal countries. No, thank you. But the second response to corruption is that the corrupt politicians and an inability to regulate. These are all problems which can conceive to. Therefore, what the World Cup does is we allow them to pinpoint the flaws. And when we pinpoint the flaws, you allow for international intervention. And here's why. One, you have pre-existing investors in that country. They have an inherent or intrinsic need or incentive to make sure that they can regulate or fix that, but also pre-existing regulatory bodies who have the responsibility to fix Brazil or to fix that country in that way. Not only that, you involve international awareness on problems actually going on in Lagos, your big argument. No, thank you. But the third final response is that we think that this is over-punishing all developing countries. Malaysia is a developing country. Other countries with a very intense sport culture are also developing. What you do is, on the assumption that they're all bad, on the assumption that it's all Brazil, only in the worst case scenario, that they only accept it in the worst case scenario, by the way, that's their absolute debate going on there. They make it unable or make every other country accountable for the flaws of other states. We don't think it's a proper proportionate punishment. No, thank you. But then final answer to this question on the quality of sports, because we devalue quality of sports when it's bad. The value of sports comes in two ways. The first is experience. We think in different countries you have different experiences because you can engage in different cultures. What you do is you only allow engagement in a monopolized culture of first world countries. Brazil, sure, US may have one of the biggest economies, but it doesn't mean they have the best sport culture. You don't allow it to pass the torch to Brazil, to Ukraine, and other countries like that. But the second thing under the quality of sports is an opportunity. No, thank you. We think every country, even if they're developing or not, should have the opportunity to prove themselves. If they really do make a mistake, then they might not be able to host a World Cup again, to host a sporting event, but there is attention on them. We now recognize in this country who host on the international scale, and maybe in the future they can change. No, thank you. Yeah, sure.
So, yeah, we can fix FIFA if we make the transparency required. But more likely, do you honestly believe that Brazil make a profit out of the World Cup, even if your leader of opposition said they did? Yeah.
My leader of opposition never said they did make a profit out of the World Cup. I think Brazil did make a profit out of the World Cup because the revenue wasn't only based on the tourism coming in from investors. All these other aspects, all these other trickle-down benefits, people have the opportunity to be exposed to. This is what World Cups can do. Sporting events can actually, especially when there's a larger audience, provide things to the World Economic Forum and stuff. So, the second is the question I'll ask on will this result in change? The one thing, the few things that Kishan talked about was that experience can come at the expense of elimination. We think that if that's their metric in judging, then what they're doing is placing a blanket policy over these things. All developing countries are then typecast to deny them the opportunity to prove themselves through an elimination process, through being at least open to that process. But the second response to that is on an opportunity. We think we should offer to that at least. But the second level to this question, on will there be trickle-down benefits? We don't think it's so black and white or so absolutist printed out by side government. The way sponsorship deals work, the way investors come in is everyone wants to have their name in the World Cup. They'll pay Brazil to be featured. They pay Brazil, or they pay whichever regulatory body in Brazil is there to have themselves there. Therefore, the money is circulated back towards the people. It isn't only in the hotels, it isn't only in the stadium. It goes to the government and back to people. If your question is regulation. But the second response to that is that local companies will also need a platform to be utilized. Now, the third and final, very briefly, on will this provide suitable development?
The only way you're going to have more schools, the only way you're going to have more able-bodied people is when they have the money to put it back into the economy. Brazil needs a platform to work off of. You don't give them the platform, you assume the change will come overnight. Therefore, you're putting them off with nothing else to work off of. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Deputy of Opposition. Now we invite the first two waves to go.
Yeah.
We're not defending the absolute worst case scenario in today's debate. We're willing to defend a country, even if it's developing, which has a reasonable income, which has promised to make stadiums and they managed to fulfill the promise, which has reasonable human rights records, which has all the facilities that are top quality to ensure proper sports ensures in the nation. We will give the bid to that country. But if a country refuses to fulfill its obligations, if a country just can't do so, he shouldn't do it. That country shouldn't be able to hold a sporting event because it just devalues the sporting event, but harms a whole bunch of other people at that point in time. My speech will answer three questions. Number one, is it principally justified for nations just can't do it to be able to do it? Secondly, which side makes sporting events much better and the culture of sport, which side better improves it? And thirdly, which side at the end of today's debate makes developing countries a much better place than they were before they hosted the international sporting event? First question, what about whether or not it's principally justified? The first question to ask under this issue is, do countries make money in this debate? Because there's a vast assumption that just because you host international sporting events, you will earn a lot of money. Because that's the assumption that they made. Then the question is, why would countries have an incentive to actually host international sporting events? The simple reason is they assume that they earn a lot of money, but the reality is they do not earn as much money as they actually want to earn at a particular point in time. Firstly, basic requirements which they haven't responded to. Nibel and Kishan told you today's debate that FIFA and the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, makes requirements like 75% profit of your nation goes to that particular body at the very end of the day. And then they told us, oh no, then there's sponsorship deals. And corporations will come into your country and then improve the situation there. There are a few reasons as to why they are wrong. The first reason is that because the country is of horrible human rights records, because the country has low investment policies, corporations generally don't pour in a lot of money into that particular nation to begin with. There is a reason why Coca-Cola spend more money in the London English Olympics versus the Beijing Olympics, because they spend more money into a country that is able to host an Olympic event much more effectively at the very end of the day. But what about sponsorship deals? Because that's what they want to say. They want sponsorship deals at the very least. First, it's not utilitarian. Sponsorship deals benefit only a certain group of people, not benefit every single group in that particular nation. But secondly, sponsorship deals are very temporary. Once countries leave and the World Cup is over, the sponsors will leave the nation because there is no incentive to stay in the nation at the very end of that day. But then they told us, FDIs are generally the best way to go because you have an increase in reputation, then FDIs, foreign direct investment, will come into your country and fuel it. Let's look at this freely, right? If foreign direct investments come into your country, then we have a subsequent interest to come into your country, right? If that subsequent interest only exists, that subsequent interest must be a permanent subsequent interest that is long-lasting and sustainable. If the subsequent interest is not permanent and long-lasting, they will not stay there. Because if likely comes to the country, if you build lavish five-star hotels in that particular nation where people can't afford booths, where people can't afford a day in a lavish hotel where majority of people, the demand is not there. So corporations will have therefore incentive to maintain the infrastructure that they already placed at that particular point in time. But what about local products? Because they said, oh no, local products. Let me ask you this. When you go to Brazil to watch the World Cup, are you more likely to buy McDonald's or go to ala Brazil chicken shop at that particular point in time? You're obviously more likely to go to McDonald's because there's a general trust that McDonald's is better quality. There is a famous reputation that McDonald's holds. So local products or local domestic markets don't actually benefit at that particular point in time. But let's take the best case scenario, right? Let's take the best possible case and say, some local markets or some local corporations do benefit at that particular point in time. That local corporation or that local market benefiting cannot come at the expense of people dying, cannot come at the expense of human rights or labor rights being abused, cannot come at the expense of a lot of people losing the right to use a train because the train was shut down for 3 weeks as the World Cup was going on. That is the justification right there. But even if they make money, so what? First, let's get 3 things that we've already argued to you and what this is. Let's say what the side is. Firstly, if they don't have the money like Brazil already because they promised and then they lied, what did they do? They took money out of other infrastructures that was harmful. Why is this bad at this particular point in time? If they take money out of infrastructures and if they gain some reasonable profit from FIFA World Cup at the end of the day, that might
that profit or the amount of money that they spend to building stadiums, the amount of money that they spend into ensuring that other companies come into the country will only benefit sports fans. But it never benefits the mass or the entire population who aren't sports fans. So people get harmed, people can't go to school, people can't use the train or the bus, but sports fans benefit at the end of the day. Because that's not justified for you to begin with. Before that, make job.
You're sincere, your country to whether or not they are able. What about South Africa when they had seen a developing country? When he hosted the World Cup, when he was in huge success, how do you compare that? You determine the country unable.
Sure, yeah, so we have a report, right? Before I told you that, if in the worst case scenario, we have this debate isn't about feasibility, whether you can intervene. If a country can, and if a country truly can host the World Cup with actual good human rights record, with reasonable income, with ability to build stadiums without harming children at the very least, then we will allow these people to go to the nation. But if a country cannot, like Brazil, where they lie, or in Qatar in 2022, then we do not give them the bid that's happening in status quo. In Qatar, people are dying building air-conditioned stadiums for so many weeks at this particular point in time because a lot of people are being forced into working this, right? The second thing, people are forced to do many things that they didn't want. So the investment leads up to this kind of impact. People are forced to do many things, especially laborers, right? Laborers have no labor rights, meaning they're forced to work overtime. But the worst case scenario is that they force children at that point in time to work for that particular corporate. This is disgusting. But they told us, oh no, we need this FIFA World Cup to determine how good a country is. Yeah, if you want to determine how good a nation is from human rights records, sit down, you send human rights officials to the nation, make a report and tell everyone about the human rights conditions in the nation. You do not need to harm every other person at their expense for your little FIFA World Cup experience and spoil sports at that point in time. But then the second issue, which side makes sports better? Because the quality will undeniably decrease. But the fact is that Brazil is obviously poorer than England. The fact is Brazil is obviously poorer than Germany. Germany or England will obviously better to have better stadiums, better facilities, better equipment for the sportsmen to have good sports, because sports can only be guaranteed when these individuals have proper equipment at a point in time. Then they told us that the monopoly of a first world nation, because FIFA is being monopolizing and only allows first world nation. Yeah, first of all, US can afford and consume the cost of the World Cup versus Brazil, who can't do that and has to kill children at expense. But secondly, the response to FIFA being corrupted isn't to allow our poor nations, so that FIFA doesn't get enough money, is to reform FIFA, not to let poor nations host the World Cup and then give it to them. But the last question that we have to ask in this debate, what about the culture? Because the other very important argument was that different countries have different culture, and that culture must be consumed into the FIFA World Cup at a particular point in time. The culture that you get in Brazil is crap because the horrible conditions that exist in Brazil, because they simply can't host a World Cup. If they can't do it and they destroy the value of sports at a particular point in time, we're not willing to defend a nation that is lying and that is we're willing to do all these kinds of horrible things. But at the very least, even if culture is big, we're willing to trade it off for having a basic World Cup that every single sportsman deserves, not killing and harming a bunch of individuals that never consented to this World Cup to begin with.
Right, thank you. Okay, now let us have the topic. Okay.
Side government is turning down every opportunity for countries such as Brazil from ever gaining revenue, from ever gaining the influx they need to improve their country. Because in the first place, they never had that influx, and for that they want to host the World Cup. Right? We only consider that they are less economically, therefore they are more pressurized. They want to get more money, they want that revenue. However, on the draw side, we do not want that to happen simply because they can't uphold their human rights. We think there are two reasons. First reason, the only reason why you know there's a human right abuse is because of this the FIFA World Cup in the first place, and we think that the international community has done its job, and I'll tell you why later. So two main issues in the debate is that which house champions less economical countries better, and is it justified for less economic countries to host this international World Cup? First issue is that under this issue is that will there be profit? Because ultimately they try to argue to us that private companies will always have the monopoly over over the local companies. However, we think that that's false. Right? We think that it doesn't matter whether you go to McDonald's or Anya Penny, as long as there's a local company, as long as there's someone promoting that right, as long as there's an opportunity
opportunity for you to promote your brand. We think that influx and the income as well is extremely important. Rather than not having any opportunity to promote it, we think that that's for people who want to try a Brazilian kind of food, they will opt in to go to Brazilian food. We think that it's extremely subjective to tell that everybody will go to McDonald's, even though it's better. People may want to try out new things, right? However, on your side, you don't defend the opportunity, you don't give the local market to life. We think that that's harmful because you never give them an opportunity. And secondly, so you never give them the opportunity, right? So on another reason of how you can gain profits, on how cable companies, local cable companies, local cable companies can sell their contracts to other international communities, right? Because they need to be ranked, they need to fill these kind of football fans. So when they sell this contract, they get money. So they get money, and for a long period of time, they get a lot of money. That means Nike can start to advertise on their blog, because the tourists who come and look, or people who watch their videos, will start to advertise on their TV. Therefore, we think that especially when there's an international TV coverage, when they sell local, when they try to promote all this kind of food, meaning that there is a profit to gain. However, I understand they turn down every single profit. They don't believe. We think that there isn't any conflict because they try to prove to us that how it won't work. They never try to give us an actual example of how human rights will be better in the first place. All they say is that no to everything I see that just started. And moving on to how children are forced to labor, they take things from other resources such as healthcare. Right? We think that the only reason why you guys knew was because the World Cup existed in the first place. When there are international media coverage of the people, when tourists went there and saw the condition of what happened, then only we knew, right? Then only we started to take action. We started to criticize FIFA or an Brazil for that. We think the other job, right? Before that, you guys never even knew. Before that, we didn't even hear of all these child prostitution, all these kind of things happening. Ever since FIFA, and even after FIFA, the international community started paying more attention to Brazil, started to give more aid to Brazil. And in your side, if there isn't any FIFA, there won't be any international coverage, there won't be awareness that Brazil will gain. We think that international sporting events has done many things, right? And we think that it's actually subjective to say they won't work, because South Africa was a developing country and it did work, and it was a success. It's something that you guys need to tell us. And before I move on to how real democracy being empowered,
So don't run away from arguments. Why can't countries host the World Cup when they've proven their ability to be economically developed? So we can also detect problems in economically less economically developed countries. There are international bodies that do surveillances and find out these problems.
Sir, we think that other countries also deserve an opportunity. If the country deems that by hosting a international sporting event gains that revenue, gains a lot of revenue, why are you guys finding those as stopping them? Even if they somehow violate their human rights, we think that by this international committee, when the international eyes or coverage on them, we think that you better this country, you allow for awareness and publicity of the country to be spread internationally. Right? We think that ultimately you want to create publicity, you want to create democracy. But how can you create democracy when you don't even know the problem and the root cause before World Cup in the first place? Something you guys need to deal with it, right? So sit down. So moving on to my next argument, right? How the culture is extremely important. Children in Brazil depend on two ways to be successful. Either work really hard or try to be a professional football player. We tell you that when you bring a World Cup in their country, you allow for reserves to be sent to the World Cup, right? Because you need a large amount of expenses to send these kinds of players outside of another country. Right? We think that when it's in the country, you spend less on these expenses, and these are kinds of things that we want. And other benefits such as stadiums. Stadiums can be reused, and furthermore, recently they made a stadium that can be reattached and bring to another country. Right? They decided to build a stadium that way. Therefore, you save costs on the stadium itself, and also how stadium can be used. Can be reused again and again for training ground for the troops. And even if, for example, tourists go all the way to Spain just to see the training grounds of Barcelona, we think that when we make them pay for these fees, we make them come, hey, this stadium is this stadium is It's the stadium that the World Cup was played in. We think that this is ultimately what we want when there's a publicity, when there is income revenue. We think that that's extremely beneficial. And finally, my final issue is that is it justified for a less developing country to host an international sport event? Because ultimately, their whole main reason of why we can't do that is because they don't have enough human rights, they abused it, and they don't have it. They've taken away resources from other places. Right? We think that there are many countries who also suffer from the same thing, but the only reason why you know that Brazil suffers from that is international. The reason why you know Brazil suffers from that is because there's an international coverage. It's because when there are many people commenting and criticizing about the terrible way about the conditions of Brazil, we think that under yours, I need to prove to us why even without these kinds of things, other places also will be better. Because ultimately, you wanted to solve that, but you never proved to us how before World Cup you've already discovered that. Ultimately, you guys need to prove that in today's debate, right? So what have we told you that you decided to be listed? Even if a country, why can't even if it's a bad decision, if a country deems that they can get revenue, why stop it? We think that Brazil or countries like that, they are pressure, they want to get their money, they want to gain back that revenue. Why are you guys stopping that? Thank you.
Right, and after all my speech.
I'll do two things in my reply speech today. Firstly, I'll explain to you why side government lost on a few reasons, and then explain on which questions eventually boil down to the victors of this debate. The first thing, why did side government lost? So why did side government lose? Side government made three flaws, well, three major flaws. The first was they were only willing to accept us in our worst case scenario. This debate isn't only about Brazil, where major flaws occur. In developing countries such as South Africa or Greece, where you have good sporting events, we don't think that you can typecast that gives you the ability to simply assume that all countries will be unable to provide a good experience. But then they say that if a country can give a good sporting event, even if it is developing, we'll still let it host the event. Question. The second reason why they lost, they were very one-dimensional. They accused us of not helping everyone. Well, of course we can't help everyone because the World Cup isn't going to go to each state in the country and then pay them in money. What happens? Exactly. What happens is over time, the money that we can generate through the World Cup circulates back to the people. So money from advertising, money from investors, money from the people who pay to stay at those fancy hotels. It all goes back to the people. And it also gives you a platform to show yourself and participate in the World Cup, by having your companies there. But the third, and one reason why I lost, is that they were very assumptions. They assumed many things, that people would never opt to local businesses because they're scared, even though they wouldn't want to try a new experience in Brazil. But this is one. But another assumption was that why would investors just leave after establishing a precedent in that country, establishing maybe other companies are establishing their own branches in there? These were assumptions that weren't clearly clarified. Now, the two questions that eventually boil down to who won the debate. The first question, which side best helps developing countries? And there were three answers provided from side opposition. The first answer, if you want to help a developing country, you need to make it get out of the stage which they're in now. That's why we provide them with an opportunity to elevate themselves from the state that they're in. The opportunity that they said was an incentive to change. Well, incentive is a word. Incentive is a word. It can't come overnight. Therefore, you need to give them some form of platform to change. Countries like Brazil, countries like South Africa, like Greece, the platform for them to change, the incentive is the World Cup. That's where they utilize the opportunity to get out of the state they're in now. That's where they can emerge. We provide you an opportunity. But the second answer is it brings attention. Even the country is so structurally and principally flawed, the only way you can address those flaws, you can bring attention to the labor and the other abuses of people, is by pinpointing it. pinpointing it to the publicity that we can create, pinpointing it to the attention and awareness that we raise. The reason why there's so much publicity already acts as an incentive for countries to not be bastards or dick around the World Cup. But third and final answer from side opposition in answering this question was in the trickle-down benefits. We think we really want trickle-down benefits, we need to have something trickle down onto people. So the water here, the waterfall, our investors, we let investors come in. It's a race to compete for who can advertise most in the World Cup. It's a race to see who gets more sponsorships because they want their brand to be known. That's what's going to get the most publicity. But we also give local companies the opportunity to participate. Now, the second and final brief question, on which side provides a more wholesome sporting event? We think when it comes to a more wholesome sporting event, you have to be wholesome. Therefore, don't have a monopoly. You don't have a monopoly of a World Cup. You don't have it only exclusive to a certain group of countries. You pass the torch around to all other countries that have an inherent and interest in culture in sport. Therefore, you have a wholesome experience where other countries can participate and people won't be bored with the same thing going over and over and over again. For all those reasons, side government cannot win. Thank you.
Right, lastly, A by Charles.
There is a reason why Germany made a lot more money when they hosted the World Cup compared to Brazil. Like, that's the reason why a lot more countries made a lot more money than what happened in Brazil, because of the structure and the economy of that particular country. As we already pointed out to you, we told you they manage their money very bad, and they don't even have the enough amount of trust within the people that they can manage their money well. Like, for so that were certainly ignored by the side of opposition that I will prove now. But before that, let's look at a few things that were confused, that our side of was confused by. We didn't tell you that we are devaluing the culture of sports in this particular country. We get it. Brazil football, very nice. But what's the point if they can't host the World Cup? Like, now everyone is shifting on Brazil because of the bad World Cup that they hosted. It's the same thing that happened in Chennai WUDC, and the same thing is going to happen in Bangladesh AFTC. We aren't only limiting this to countries that have that prove to us that they have a stable economy. Like, obviously, it's not a one-day thing. It's obviously a long period of things that we have indexes that can prove that your country has a stable economy based on precedent that has less human rights abuses. All these kind of things will come into the play. But they made a three good and very funny arguments. First thing that they wanted to argue on was wholesome. I'll give you wholesome very high. The second thing that they wanted, the funny thing they pointed out was Greece. Greece of all countries are their best example. And the third thing, besides Sid's Power Ranger moves, nothing he proved to us. He told us that they would make an investment and that countries will now have a spotlight to the country. We'll use the World Cup as the experiment of scientific experiment to prove whether Brazil is shit. The point here is that countries around the world know that Brazil is less economically developed. We don't need a World Cup to tell the rest of the world that, as we've already told you. The few things that in three questions, what did they tell us? First, will they make an investment? As we already told you, it's not enough of money to call it an investment in the first place, because if 75% the money is going to FIFA and 25% is rest, is not enough that they have to take a 4 billion of a debt to cover up for all the stadiums. Then what is the investment? It's a loss. Like, it's a loss of an investment. So all the money is swindled away from the railway station. All the money is swindled away from the economy and social welfare. It's not an investment. It's them covering up their bad investment at the end of the day, as I already told you. Secondly, when we already told you that they lied to FIFA, that they will cover up and then they swindle the money and all these kind of things are a spotlight to show that these countries are a bad country. This is what they wanted to tell you. Like, if we wouldn't have known that Brazil is a corrupted country if they didn't host the World Cup, obviously not. But we don't think that this is the only way. As Christian pointed out, like, we can send, like, people will know that Brazil is a good country or not if we have things like the indexes that we will mark them with, whether they're an economically sufficient country or not. But we are not willing to take off the World Cup that happens 4 years once, that every single country really cares about, and devalue the value of football for an experiment that is not going to work, because we already know the result of that particular experiment. The third and last thing that they told us was investment is good because we can use the stadium for training. Yeah, you don't need 12 stadiums to train one team. As I already pointed out in my speech, there is an over expenditure. Like, it becomes redundant. The hotels that you build for the players, the people on the ground can't buy it because they don't even have money money to survive. What luxury hotel that you wanted to go and buy things from? So it's not only about Brazil, it's about any country. Obviously, England will host a better World Cup than Brazil, and it's clear, it's evidently proven. Let's look at a few things that we told you. Firstly, we told you why it's bad for these countries to host the World Cup, why they took too much of a risk, and explain why they think that they will make an investment. At the end of the day, they will lose out because they think it's a really important investment at the end of the day. Secondly, we told you that we'll devalue sports. One thing is hosting a sporting event, another thing is upholding the value of sports while hosting that sporting event, like not having cheap investments and not having cheap facilities whatsoever. The third thing that we talked about is that democracy isn't upheld. Like, people don't want the World Cup to happen in Brazil, especially when the conditions there are so shitty. Like, and the fourth and last thing that we explained to you is that if countries really need a proof to be a stable country, like obviously that's the only reason that we give them. You prove that you have a stable economy, you can host the World Cup. We're not going to ask you for a certificate because you're going to lie about that certificate. Obviously, there is a good metric in proving whether the country is economically developed or not. We're very proud of you.
A, and little